Hey guys, welcome to day 48 of 100 Days of Code. Today we're going to be introducing a new technology for advanced web scraping, and that is Selenium Webdriver. Now you might have heard of Selenium Webdriver before because it's probably one of the most well-known automation and testing tools for web developers out there. But you might be wondering, well, we already have beautiful soup, so why do we need to learn a new technology? Well, one of the things that we've really been limited by is we can't actually use all the capabilities that browsers can do. So when we load up a website with Beautiful Soup, we can't, for example, type something into the website and then click on something, and to create these chains of continuous actions where we basically automate the entire flow of a particular job or a particular task. To do that, we're going to need to use Selenium WebDriver. Now, this is a free tool and it basically allows us to automate the browser. Get the browser to do things automatically depending on a script or a piece of code that we write. Now, this is going to enable us to type as well as click, as well as scroll. Basically anything that a human pretty much can do on a website, you can do using a Selenium-driven browser. It's kind of like we're building a robot and telling it what to do on a browser. And Selenium is the tool that allows the robot to interact and communicate with the browser. And once we've leveled up, we'll be able to do all sorts of things, like, for example, play web-based games like Cookie Clicker automatically, to click on this cookie all by itself using the code instead of us having to manually do it, and then to select upgrades and to purchase them again completely automatically. If you ever wanted to be the best at Cookie Clicker or any other web-based game, and you don't want to invest the time in skilling up and getting good at it yourself, well then this is where automation might help you. But on a more serious note, you might use something like Selenium to automate filling in forms or transferring information from an Excel spreadsheet to an online Google form, or basically doing anything that is repetitive and tedious and you don't want to do yourself. So once you're ready, head over to the next lesson and let's start learning about this new superpower. In order to start using Selenium WebDriver, we're going to have to go through a number of steps in order to set up our browser and also to install and set up Selenium. Now, the first step, if you haven't already, is to install the Chrome browser. Now, while you can work with Selenium using other browsers like Firefox or Safari, we're going to be using a number of Chrome developer tools. And also, in order for you to work alongside, to do exactly what I'm doing, it'll be much easier if you're working on the same browser and the same technology. If you haven't already got Chrome, then head over to the course resources where you'll find a link to download the latest version for your computer. And then once you've done that, the next step is to download the Chrome driver. And this is different from the actual browser. Again, in the course resources, you'll find a link to all the Chrome drivers, and we have to download the version of Chrome driver that matches the version of Chrome that we have. In order to find out the version of Chrome, all you have to do, head over to the top right corner, click on these three dots, go to Help, and then go to About Google Chrome. Here, it's going to tell you which version you're currently running. And because you're going to be watching the video in the future, this version might not be the same for you as you see right here. Currently, I am completely up to date, so the latest version that I'm running is version 84. Now, all I have to do is go back here and find the version of 84 and download it. So I just have to click here and it will take me to a page where I've got three options. Now, if I'm running a Linux computer, then I click on this one. If I'm running a Mac, I click on this one. And Windows users will click on this one. So I'm running a Mac, so I'm going to take that particular file. Now I'm going to have to unzip the file and I end up with the actual Chrome driver. Now, the final step is to move this Chrome driver to a location of our choice. I don't recommend keeping the driver inside the downloads folder just because I'm sure you, as well as I, we will often delete everything in the downloads folder without a lot of inspection. So we should move this Chrome driver to somewhere else, somewhere where it's not likely to get deleted accidentally. In my case, I'm going to go up a level with Command Up. And here I've got a folder that I've created called Development. Now you can create a folder anywhere you like, and then call it anything you like, and move this Chrome driver over to the new location. Now the most important thing though is to actually get the file path for this particular file. To do that on a Mac, all we have to do is right click and go to Get Info, and then where it says where we're going to copy all of that, hit Command C to copy, and then we're going to go into a new project that we've created, which I've named Day 48. In the main.py, I'm going to paste this entire file path, and I'm going to save it as the Chrome driver path, like this. Now, the final step we have to add to this path is to add a / to the actual Chrome driver. PyCharm should auto-suggest the name of Chrome driver, but this is now the full path that will take us to that particular driver. Now, if you're on Windows, the process is pretty much the same. Once you've downloaded the driver for your system, so Windows 32, then you're going to go ahead and open it up and unzip it. So click on this extract button so that you can actually extract everything that's inside. Now it's going to ask you for a destination for where you want to put the extracted file. So we're going to click on Browse, and you're going to select a location on your computer. Now, if you don't have a preference, I recommend just going to your C drive and then here creating a new folder called Development. And then inside this folder is where you're going to extract the Chrome driver. So go ahead and click Extract. And then once that's done, we'll go and navigate to that location. So it was in the C drive and it was inside the development folder. And you can check and just make sure that your Chrome driver is sitting inside here and it's an application that you've extracted from the zip file. Now, to find out its file path, we're going to right click and go to Properties. And then in the properties, you see the location right here. So here is the location, and all we have to do is just to select everything that's here and then go ahead and use Control-C to copy it, and then we can paste it into our file in PyCharm. So we're going to paste it inside a string like this, and again we're going to save it into the name that is Chrome driver path, like this. And again, we're doing the same thing that we did with the Mac. We're going to add another / and then add the name of our Chrome driver, like this. So now that we've installed Chrome and we've downloaded the Chrome driver, the next and last step is to install and set up Selenium. In my main.py, I'm going to import Selenium. And make sure that you spelt it correctly so it looks like this. And then we're going to click on this red light bulb, as always, to install our package. Now, once Selenium has been installed successfully, I'm going to change the import statement. I'm going to say that from this newly installed Selenium package, I'm going to import a module called Webdriver. And it's this Webdriver which is going to be driving the Chrome browser and doing all of our automated tasks. Let's create a new driver from that new module. So driver equals Webdriver dot, and then we can now instantiate any browser of our choice. So in our case, we're going to be creating a Chrome browser to drive, but you can see that you can also have Firefox or Safari and a large number of other browsers. We're going to choose Chrome. And notice that this is Chrome with a capital C, so we're initializing a new object here. And the only required argument we have to give is the executable path. So this is the path of the executable that is the Chrome driver that we downloaded previously. This is going to be the path, and notice that it's the location where that Chrome driver lives, and then at the very end we've got the actual name of the executable, which on a Mac is called Chrome driver, on Windows it's chromedriver.exe. Let's go ahead and pass this in here. And now that we've created our driver, we're pretty much done with installing and setting up Selenium WebDriver. But if you're wondering what this Chrome driver is, well, here's the way to think about it. We've got our Selenium package, which contains code for us to be able to interact with browsers. Now, it can interact with the Chrome browser, which is what we're choosing to do, but it can also interact with a bunch of other ones like Safari or Firefox. Now, how do we make sure that this package, which can handle all three, knows specifically how to work with the Chrome browser? Well, we're going to need some sort of a bridge that bridges the Selenium code to work with the Chrome browser. And this bridge is provided by the Chrome driver. So there'll be a different driver for Safari and there'll be a different driver for Firefox. And just by switching up those drivers, it'll tell Selenium how to work with the latest version of these browsers. All we have to do is now use it. So the first thing I'm going to use my driver to do is I'm just going to get it to open up a web page. We'll use driver.get, and then we can pass in the URL here. So it's going to be HTTPS, and then I'm going to go to amazon.com. Now, if you're on Windows and you go ahead and run the code, then it should run without any issues. But if you're on a Mac, this is what happens. You'll get a pop-up that says Chrome driver cannot be opened because the developer cannot be verified, even though we know that this is actually created by Google specifically for the Chrome browser. So if this happens, you're going to click cancel and you'll get all of these errors because it's unable to access that file. Now, in order to enable it, we're going to go to the Apple symbol, System Preferences, and then we're going to go to Security and Privacy. And here, because we tried to run it before, we've got something that says Chrome driver was blocked from use. So we're going to click on the Allow Anyways. And now, if we run this again, then it will give us this pop-up, and all we have to do is click Open. And once we've done all of that, now it's going to finally open up the site that we wanted to go to, Amazon.com, using this automated version of Chrome. And you can see this because right at the top here, it says Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. That is our Selenium. The driver.get method effectively opens up a new browser window with the URL that you've specified. Now, you'll also want to close down the window or the entire browser once you're done with whatever it is you may want to automate or do. To do that, all we have to do is tap into driver, and then we can call the method close. Now, when I hit the run button, you can see now it's going to open up Amazon.com, and as soon as that page loaded, it pretty much just closed it down. Now, there's also another method called driver.quit. Now, what's the difference between close and quit, you might wonder? Well, close actually just closes a single tab, the active tab where you've opened up a particular page. Now, quit is actually going to quit the entire browser. There are certain cases where you have more than one tab running at the same time. Close will close that particular tab, while quit will actually quit the entire program. Once I'm done using my driver, I prefer actually just using quit to shut down the entire browser. That way we can always start again from scratch and we'll have a fresh browser to work with. And in the next and coming lessons, we're going to show you how to use Selenium to do basically anything that we could do with a mouse and keyboard as humans, but instead we're going to automate the entire process and workflow. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. Now that we've seen how we can get started using Selenium WebDriver to automate our browser, The next step is to figure out how to use Selenium to find and locate specific HTML elements on the web page. Just between where we quit our driver and where we get hold of a particular page, I'm going to show you how easy it is to complete the previous task in day 47, where we tried to get hold of the price of a particular item on Amazon.com. This was the item that we were interested in. This was the instant part, and this is the price. So if I go ahead and take this URL and replace this previous just Amazon.com URL with the URL that takes us to this page, then we can start inspecting on this particular element. So here we've got the price, which is inside a span with the ID of price block or price. Now, if I use that, then I can simply say driver dot find element by ID, and then I can paste in the ID that I found just now, and this is going to be equal to the price element. Now, if I want to get hold of the price, all I have to do is to print that element dot text. And now if I hit run, you'll see our browser open up briefly to the page with the instant part, and then it'll close down and you can see the price printed right here. Now, the reason why this is so much shorter than what you did in the last project is because we're driving a browser. So the browser is already sending all of those headers, all of the information that Amazon would expect from an actual user, instead of using a GET request, using the request package. So in only 3 lines, we can do so much more than we could do with Beautiful Soup. Essentially, if you think about it, Beautiful Soup was really good for just grabbing and scraping pieces of data from an HTML website. But it gets stuck when that website is being rendered using JavaScript or Angular or React, and the content that was HTML was taking time to load, or it requires certain conditions to load. Whereas in this case, we're effectively doing exactly the same thing as we would as a human, going to this particular URL and then looking at this element and its value. I wanted to show you a couple of other ways that you could find elements, because as soon as I write driver.find, you can see there's a whole bunch of ways of finding elements, and there's a lot more methods than you have with Beautiful Soup. One that I want to show you that's quite useful is find element by name. If we go to python.org, you'll remember from your lessons on HTML and CSS that most forms, these input forms, will have a name attribute. So if I go ahead and inspect on this search bar, you can see it's got an ID, it's got a name, it's got a type, it's got a role, it's got a class, it's got a whole bunch of attributes. Now I'm going to search for it by this name, which is Q. And I can do that by saying find element by name and then specify the name as Q. Now, of course, I'll have to change this URL to actually python.org. And now, once we've found our element by name, we'll call it the search bar. And then we'll go ahead and print out this search bar. When Selenium locates a particular element, it won't actually print out the actual HTML. It'll give it to you as a Selenium element, like this. Now, if you want to tap into its various attributes or text or tag name, then you'll actually have to do that using a dot. So we can say search bar.tag name, and it will give us that that is an input tag. Or we could say search bar.get attribute, and we can specify the attribute that we want the value for. So for example, if I wanted to know what the placeholder value was, then all I have to do is put get attribute placeholder, and then we can print that out, and it will tell us that the placeholder says search. So that is something that you'll find people commonly use with Selenium, find element by name. And it's really useful when it comes to filling in web forms, because most forms will have elements that are organized by name, because when the form is submitted, that name is carried along with the value of the inputs. In addition to find element by name, you'll also see the usual ones. So find element by class name, for example. So if we wanted to get hold of this logo here, then it has a class of Python-logo. So all I have to add here is the name of the class, which is Python-logo, and this will give me that logo element. Now, from the logo element, I can actually get hold of things even like its size. So let's go ahead and print out the size of the logo. It has a height of 82 and a width of 290. So you can see that we can do a lot more with Selenium than we could with Beautiful Soup. So that's find element by ID, by name, by class name. But there's also, of course, find element by CSS selector. And this is probably one of the easiest ways of narrowing down on a particular element. Let's say that I wanted to get hold of this link to the docs. Let's go ahead and inspect it, and it lives inside an anchor tag. But you can see that this anchor tag has no class, it has no ID, has no easy way of identification. So how do we get hold of it? Well, we can see that it lives in a paragraph element, and then going further up, it's inside a div with this particular class. So this has a class of documentation widget. So that's pretty specific. So if we wanted to get hold of that anchor tag, we could just say, well, inside this div of documentation widget, let's go ahead and find any anchor tags. And to express that as a CSS selector, we would specify the class documentation widget, and then inside the element with that class, we're looking for an anchor tag. So this would get us our documentation link. And now if I go ahead and print the documentation link .text, you can see that it's actually getting hold of this particular link. And this is done even though the actual link doesn't have any easily identifiable name or class or ID. Now, on a similar vein, sometimes it's extremely hard to even find an element even by CSS selector. So if all else fails, one that will always work is the XPath. The XPath is a way of locating a specific HTML element by a path structure. So you've seen what paths look like, right? Users / Angela / development, etc. Well, we can also express the navigation to a particular element, drilling down from the top of the tree to a particular node using the XPath. Let's say I want to get hold of this link at the bottom, submit website bug. Let's go ahead and inspect on it, and you can see it's not particularly unique in terms of having an ID or a class or a name, and even in terms of its structure, it's sort of in this UL and then in an LI, and it might not be that easy to get to it. But here's where our XPath comes in handy. Let's go ahead and right click on it and then go to copy XPath. And now we can go back to our code and use it to tap into that element. So we'll say driver, and then we'll say find element by XPath. And then inside here, we're going to paste our XPath. Now notice that the XPath itself actually has some double quotes. So we have to change our double quotes into single quotes so that it doesn't clash with the inner double quotes. So like this. Now, once we've found our bug link, then we're going to print out the link, and I'm going to get hold of the href here. So now I'm going to print my buglink.txt just to prove that this worked. And if I hit run, you can see it opens up our browser, and you can see it's managed to get hold of that particular link using this very specific XPath, which looks very much like a file path that we've been using. but it's essentially the way that we would navigate down through the divs, the ULs, the LIs, all the way down to that particular anchor tag. And the best part of all is, of course, you can use this button here in Chrome to locate any element, and then that would select its location in the code, and then you can right click and then copy its XPath to get hold of that particular thing. Now, I'm going to link to the documentation on XPath from W3 Schools. It goes into a little bit more detail about how XPaths are constructed, but you don't need to know this in order to work with them. As I've shown, you can simply use the Chrome developer tools and it will help you get to the particular item you're interested in. Now, we've been looking at finding elements using Selenium, but notice how we've always stuck to the singular version of that method, find element. Now, for every single method that I've shown you, there's also a counterpart, which is the find elements. So, for example, find elements by CSS selector. And of course, this is just going to find you everything on the screen that matches your criteria and give it to you in a list. And there is a version of this for every single find method that we've shown so far. In the next lesson, I've got a quick challenge for you to put into practice what you've learned and to be able to locate any given element on a web page. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. Now, in the last lesson, we looked at various ways of finding and locating elements on a particular HTML page. Now, in this lesson, we're going to put all of that to practice, and you're going to get hold of all of these upcoming events. Now, because these events are time dependent, the events that you'll see will, of course, be different from what I've got here. But the idea is to get hold of all of these dates, so all 5 of these, and then get hold of all 5 of these names, and we're going to create a dictionary from these events. And by the end of the challenge, you should be able to print out a dictionary that's structured like this. It's going to contain 5 items, starting from 0, so this is the first key, and then the first value is a dictionary with a key of time and a key of name, and then the values corresponds to, of course, the first date and the first name. So the first one we've got here is PyCon Japan 2020, and you can see down here in this section, upcoming events, the first one is this item. So we're basically converting whatever is here in the upcoming events into this dictionary format. That is the goal, and you're going to be needing everything that you've learned previously. In addition, it might be worth taking a look at the documentation for locating elements with Selenium. So I'll link to this page in the course resources as well. And once you're ready, get inspecting and see if you can complete this challenge and print out this dictionary. Pause the video now. So our goal is to get hold of this piece of data and this piece of data, but just the text. So we're going to have to first figure out how to locate these items. So if I go ahead and inspect on this date, you can see that it's inside a HTML element called time. Now, in order to get hold of this element time, we can, of course, use an XPath, but the problem is that this XPath will be specific for this first item. While we actually probably want to use a find method that can find all of the dates and all of the event names. So we're going to be using one of these multiple element finds. So where it says find elements. Now, I think the easiest way here, at least for me, is to think about it in terms of CSS selectors. This is a time element that lives inside a LI, which is inside a UL, but we still haven't found anything that's unique to this particular structure here. Because if you take a look over here, when we look at the latest news, it's also a time inside an LI, inside a UL, and none of this is unique until we get to this div where we have a blog widget. While here, we've got a event widget. So there finally is a unique class name. So we're going to use this class name and then find the time element. Back in our code, let's go ahead and tap into our driver and then use the find elements by CSS selector, which is going to give us a list of elements that match this selector. And the selector is going to be first find a div with this particular class. So it has to have the class event widget. So we'll write dot event widget. And then after a space, we specify the next thing we want to drill down to, which is a time element. So let's go ahead and just put the name of the HTML element like this, and we'll get the event times as a list, hopefully. So let's go ahead and print this out, event times. And because this is actually going to be a Selenium object rather than the actual text, we'll need to use a for loop in order to actually see what it is. So for time in event times, let's go ahead and print each of the time.text. So once Selenium's done its thing, you can see it's now got hold of all 5 dates. Now, the next thing we need to do is to get hold of the event names. And we're going to use a similar method. So let's go ahead and inspect on the name. And you can see that this is now an anchor tag. Now, you might think that the solution will be just as simple as copying what we had before and replacing the time element with an anchor tag element. But you'll see as I write my for loop, for name in event names, print name.text, this does not actually get us what we want, because it also gives us the first anchor tag in that div with class name event widget, which is this more link here. So if we don't want that more link, we're going to have to be a little bit more creative. This anchor tag is also inside an li, while that more link is definitely not inside an li. So we can narrow down on our selector by saying, okay, so it's inside a element with class event widget, but then it's inside an li, and then it's inside an anchor tag. So now that I've updated that CSS selector, you can see when I hit print, it gets us the actual names of all of the conferences. So the final thing to do is to actually create our events dictionary. You could do this using dictionary comprehension, but I'm going to do it in a slightly more long form way, just so that anybody who's a little bit confused, it'll make it a little bit easier to understand. So we're going to create a for loop, and I'm going to use n. So I'm going to say for n in range, and the range is going to be from 0 to the length of event times. So it's basically going to be a range from 0 to 4. Once I've got that range, now I'm going to add to my events. The key of the event is the actual n, so the number, and then the value of the event is a dictionary with the key of time and also a key of name, like this. Now the time is going to be from the event times and then getting hold of the item at index n, and the name is going to be event names and the item at index n. Now the final thing we need to do is this gets hold of a Selenium object, and we have to get hold of the actual text. So let's write .text, and now we can print our events dictionary. And once that's done, you can see this is in the exact format that we wanted. We've got dictionary with 5 items. Each item has a dictionary in itself, time and name of the upcoming Python conferences. So did you manage to complete that challenge? If not, it might be worth either reviewing CSS selectors, which we went through in previous lessons, or reviewing some of the lessons previously where we discussed how to locate and how to get hold of the text from elements using Selenium. In this lesson, I have another super quick challenge for you so you can practice setting up the Selenium WebDriver in a blank project and scraping a different piece of data from a website. This time we're going to work with the Wikipedia main page. So you can head over to the course resources and find the link to this page, or you can just type it in. Back in our project, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this interaction.py. Now, in this new Python file, we're going to interact with this Wikipedia web page. And as a challenge to you, the first thing I want you to do is to figure out how you can get hold of this particular number and print it out inside our interaction.py. Remember that you'll need to import Selenium and also use the WebDriver to get hold of this page and then find this particular number and finally print it out. And then when you're ready to run it, all you have to do is right click and then run this interaction.py, and it will work and you should see the outcome being printed in your console. So pause the video now and give that a go. All right, so here's the solution. First, we're going to go into the Selenium package, which we've already installed into this project, so we don't have to install it again. And then we're going to import the WebDriver. Now, using the WebDriver, we're going to create a new driver from the Chrome browser. So we're going to have to navigate to that path again. Now, this is my path, and your path might be a little bit different, but this is what we put to initialize a new Chrome driver. Now, once we've created our driver, now we can use the driver to navigate to our web page, which is done using get. And this is the URL which we'll copy and paste into here. And once we've gotten hold of this page, then we're going to try to narrow down on this particular element. So let's go ahead and inspect it. And you can see that it's inside an anchor tag with no particular identifiers. There's no ID, there's no name, there's no class. But this anchor tag lives in a div that has an ID. So this article count is going to be a unique identifier for the div that holds this particular anchor tag. So we can narrow in on this anchor tag using our CSS selectors. So we can say driver.find element by CSS selector, make sure that it's element, not elements. And then inside here, we're going to put our selector, which is first the ID of article count. And that is going to be preceded with a pound sign. And then inside that div with that ID, we're looking for the first anchor tag. Now, notice that inside that div, there's actually two anchor tags, but by using this find element by CSS selector, it's only going to give us the first one that matches this criteria. So this is going to be our article count. And now what we want to do is we want to print the article count dot text. So now let's go ahead and right click and run our interaction.py. It should open up our browser to this page, and now it should have found and printed out that number. So this is what we've been doing so far, creating our driver, opening web pages, and then finding specific elements and printing some sort of property. But the next step is to actually form some sort of interaction with the web page. For example, clicking on a link or typing something into the search bar. Because after all, when we're working with websites, it's often that we'll need to interact with it in order to navigate to new pages and get hold of specific pieces of information that we're interested in. And that's what I'm going to show you in the next lesson. So I'll see you there. In the last lesson, we looked at how we can find elements using Selenium on a web page. In this lesson, I want to focus more on how to interact with those elements that you found. For example, typing into an input field or clicking on a button. The first thing I want to show you is how to click on something. in this case, we've already gotten hold of an anchor tag, which is inside a div called article count. It's basically this anchor tag. And if I want to click on it, not using my mouse, but using Selenium, all I have to do is to get hold of the element, which is this article count, and then call the .click method on it. It's as simple as that. And once I hit run, you'll see that my cursor is nowhere near the link, but it actually clicked through and it got to the statistics page from that link. So it's basically the equivalent of me doing this, but it was done automatically. This was one way that we could have gotten hold of a link and then clicked on it. Now, because this is such a common requirement to click on a link on a web page, Selenium actually has a specific find method that makes this really easy. For example, if we wanted to click on this link that says all portals, where it lists all the different Wikipedia portals, basically subsections of Wikipedia, well, one of the things that we could do is simply get hold of this link text, which says all portals, and then we can create an object using our driver by tapping into find element by link text. And all we have to put in there is the link text, which said all portals. So now I can say all portals.click, and if we go ahead and comment out this part, then you can see it's going to open up our web page and it's going to click on that all portals, taking us to this page. So this is a find method that's pretty specific to links, where we just find it by the text that is in between the anchor tag. So for example, when I inspect on that all portals, you can see that this is the anchor tag and the link text is the part between the opening and closing tags. So it's now searching by that text, which is a common need that you might have when you're going onto a website. Now that we've seen how we can click on links once we've identified them, what about typing? Let's say we wanted to search for Python in this search bar. How might we do that? Well, first, let's go ahead and get hold of the search bar. So I'm going to inspect on that, and it takes me to this input element. And the thing that we can identify it by is its name, which is equal to search. So I can use our method, which is find element by name, and then pass in search as the name of the element I want to get hold of. Now, once I've gotten hold of that element, then I can use a method called send keys. And this is going to be the keys from the keyboard that you want to send to this particular element. So let's say I wanted to type Python in there. Well, all I have to do is type send keys Python. And now when I hit run, you can see that it's going to automatically go over there and type in the word Python. My hands are completely off the keyboard and my cursor is nowhere near the search bar. So that was all done automatically. Now, once we've typed in Python, the next thing we want to do is hit the return key, right? Or the enter key. Now, when we want to send a key that's not a letter or one of the numbers or symbols, then we actually have to do a separate import. From the Selenium package, inside the Webdriver folder, there's a folder called Common, and inside there's something called Keys. This Keys contains a class called Keys, and that contains a bunch of constants. What we can do is we can say search.sendKeys, and the key that we're going to send comes from this keys class, and it's one of the constants in there, which is called enter. This is basically the return key, but you can see there's also other ones like shift or tab. Basically, any key that you have on the keyboard can be replicated by the keys class. Effectively, what we're doing here is we're finding that search bar, typing in Python, and then hitting the enter key. So let's run this and see it in action. And that takes us to the search results. So now we've seen how we can click on buttons once we've located something that is clickable, like a button or an anchor tag. We've seen how we can type something into a field using send keys. And finally, we've seen how we can import this class of keys, which contains a whole bunch of constants that represents the key codes for a lot of the common keys like Enter, Shift, Control, etc. Now I have a challenge for you. I want you to try and see if you can figure out yourself how to use Selenium to automatically insert your name, your last name, and email address, and then hit the sign up button in order to fill out this form. Now, if you're successful, it should take you to this success page. Now, don't worry if you actually type in your real email address or not. This is a web page that we created as a part of the complete web development course. It's another course that I do which goes into detail on web technologies like JavaScript, Node, React, and this is a site that we built in that course. Now, the reason why I'm taking you to this page is because I don't want you to go onto a random web page, like a real website where they're actually collecting valid data. If we're doing our practices and our exercises on a real website, we'll end up giving them a lot of bot traffic and it's not great for the website. This is why I'm getting you guys to use my own website, which is set up for testing anyways. So the link to the page is in the course resources, or you could type it in as you can see here. Now, as I mentioned, this is not a sign up to our actual newsletter, which lives on this page, where every month I personally write a letter to you, updating you on what we've been up to, what I've been up to, and some articles that I've come across on the internet that I found to be really interesting in terms of programming, design, or startup culture. If you actually want to sign up to the newsletter, then head over to this link and put your email address here. But in order to test your skills on Selenium, we want you to head over to this link and see if you can fill out this form automatically using what you've learned, and then get your Selenium to click sign up. Pause the video now and see if you can complete this challenge. So the first thing we need to do is to copy the URL. And then back over here, I'm going to comment out everything that I've got so far. And I'm going to change my driver to go to this new URL. Now, once I've gotten to the new URL, I want to go ahead and try to find and identify each of these fields. So let's click on Inspect. And you can see that this first field has a name of F name. The second one has a name of L name, and the final one has a name of email. So let's identify those using our driver dot find, and we're going to use the find element by name, passing in F name, and then it was L name for last name, and then it was email. So this is going to be our first name, last name, and email. The next step is to actually fill it in. So we're going to say first name dot send keys, and then I'll pass in my first name, and then it's going to be last name dot send keys, and then I'll pass in my last name. And finally, we've got our email, and I'll just pass in a dummy email. So now I'm going to try and find this button by inspecting on it and seeing how I can identify it using my code. So it's a button with all of these classes and a type, but no ID or name. Given that this is the only button element inside this form, then I'm going to go ahead and identify it by using CSS selector. So it's inside the form and it's a button element. And finally, once I've found it, I'm simply going to click on it. So our script is going to go in order. So it's first going to load up the page, type in all of these things, and then finally click on it. So let's hit run and see if that worked. That was lightning fast because obviously it's not me typing. And it clicked on the button and it took us to the success page. How did you get on with that? So now we've seen how to use Selenium to find elements, to interact with them by clicking and typing. And also we saw how we can import the keys constant to interact with the website with any key on our keyboard. So there's quite a few methods we've gone through. It might be worth taking some notes and having a quick review of how we've managed to do all of these things using Selenium. Because in the next lesson, we've got the final project coming up and it's going to be all up to you to try and solve it. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. It's now time for the final project where we put everything into practice. Now, before I reveal the next message, just a word of warning, it has explicit content. If you are hungry, if you haven't eaten, if you are intermittent fasting like me, it might be worth skipping over the next image. But it does describe what we're going to do in this project. We're going to be baking some cookies. We're going to be playing the cookie clicker game, but we're not going to do it normally like a normal person. We're not going to go and click on our cookies and tirelessly end up with repetitive strain injury and play the game as if we're a human. No, we're going to play it using a Python bot created with Selenium. So recently I've been looking on Reddit and there's a lot of posts talking about how addictive this cookie clicker game is. Why is this game so addicting? Cookie clicker ruined my life. And when you think about it, it's such a simple game. All it is a big giant cookie. You click on it as fast as you can. And once you've gotten a number of cookies, then you can buy certain upgrades, like a cursor, which will click on the cookie automatically for you. And if you get even more cookies, you can end up buying other things. For example, once you have 100 cookies, you can buy a grandma, which will bake more cookies for you. But we're not going to do it manually because I can physically not click at this rate. We're going to get our bot to decide which add-ons to buy that make sense and to buy as many of these add-ons as we have money. And we're going to get our bot to continuously click the cookie to bake even more cookies. So the goal is we're trying to max out on this cookies per second rating, because the more of these add-ons that you buy, the more often that you click on the cookie, the more cookies per second you can bake. So basically what we want to do is to not even touch our mouse and use Selenium to play this game for us. And we're going to try and get some high scores by cheating, basically. So the goal is to max out the cookies per second, and we're going to be playing this game by clicking on this cookie automatically using Selenium. And once we've clicked for 5 seconds, we're going to see what is the highest value add-on we can buy, and then we'll buy it to help us with the game. So the goal at the end of the day is we're going to run the program for 5 minutes, and at the end of the 5 minutes, we're going to check our cookies per second, and we're going to compete with each other on that number. Because of course you can get Selenium to play the game in different ways. So what I recommend first before you get started with the project is just to head over to this link, which is in the course resources, and actually play the game first as a human so that you can understand how it works and see how these add-ons really help us improve our rate of baking cookies. Pause the video now, head over to this link, play the game for maybe 5 minutes, and then head over to the next lesson where there's the full instructions for how to complete this challenge.